What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of Before the Whistle, presented by BRK Insurance Group. If your business is looking for the best in employee benefits, commercial property and casualty insurance, or retirement and 401k plan services, there's no one better suited to meet your challenges and build a plan centered around your needs than BRK Insurance Group. What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another game week. I'm your host, Maddy here on Before the Whistle, and I'm really excited to preview Tulane's upcoming game against Kansas State this Saturday at 11 a.m. on ESPN with our broadcast on 104.1 The Spot, as always, with a lot of anticipation coming into this matchup as Kansas State moved up in the rankings from 18 to now be 17th. And really, I think this is Tulane's chance. I know that the team's goals are the conference championship and that they're still trying to get a lot of things answered, but it's hard to ignore the impact that a win against a Power 4 opponent in these next 2 weeks for Tulane could do for their rankings and looking forward into the college football playoffs, where there are still not any G5 teams ranked. I'm sure they will wait until as long as humanly possible to respect that. But Boise State with 47 votes was the highest ranked G5 team. They play number 7 ranked Oregon this weekend. Memphis plays, who's now not ranked, Florida State, and they received 27 votes. And it's now almost turned into a must-win game for them, considering Florida State starting the year 0-2. And Tulane fans, quite honestly, should be rooting for Memphis to do well at this point. And so they should be able to beat Florida State this weekend. And then the other team ahead of Tulane is Liberty with 12 votes. They're playing an unranked New Mexico State. So Tulane has 4 going into this matchup. But a win this weekend, I think, could do a lot for this team. But what's really exciting to me is I just got off doing a show with Morgan Uber on the American Conference to preview this matchup. But I remember how much attention Tulane received after the fact when they beat Kansas State in the 2022 season. But heading into that year, that game was on ESPN+. A lot of people missed what was one of Tulane's best performances of the year and the one that really put them on the map. So for Tulane to kind of have this credence going into the game, I think just says a lot about what this team's trajectory under John Summerall this offseason, all of the anticipation and the momentum that paid off in a 52-0 opening victory. For a coach to be disappointed in that and still have that overwhelming margin of victory. And it was one that excited players, some that we heard from today, which I'm going to kind of break down today. The idea that, yeah, Tulane is a scoring team, and it's going to be curious to see how they approach this weekend. But I think they can see it now, and that's really what's the most exciting part of all of this. So let's just kind of go all over the place and break down this weekend's matchup. To quickly plug myself, and it continues to feel weird every single time, but we are still running the Maddy over at Blue Oak Barbecue. And MJ Lloyd, the mixologist of my dreams that created this drink with me, that has had such an awesome rollout, including Ethan Hudak and his mom going to try these drinks. He said he will have gallons available ahead of this game. And as Coach John Summerall said, you can't drink all day unless you start in the morning. So make sure to go get one of those. Again, that's at 900 North Carrollton Avenue in New Orleans, where you can get a gallon of Maddy Hudakeries ahead of this exciting matchup for Tulane this weekend. One that, despite really, it shouldn't be this way. Tulane had to replace Tajay Spears, and you shouldn't be able to do that as immediately as they did with Mekhi Hughes, and yet they did. They shouldn't have been able to replace their linebacking group and the leadership that Nick Anderson and Dorian Williams had and their effect on this team like they have over the last couple of seasons. But Tulane is here to compete. The question was replacing Michael Pratt under center. And again, this is off of one game. This is going to be the real test this weekend, but no one can ignore just the level of poise that Darian Mensah had as a redshirt freshman quarterback to be not only have that be his first collegiate start, but have it be the first start of a quarterback not named Michael Pratt for Tulane. I know the Military Bowl was there, but it was one that I don't think is a fond memory for a lot of Green Wave fans. But this is the real, what we would say at this point is successor to Pratt. And he displayed that ability when you consider the fact that his first college throw was a third down conversion, and the way that he just operated out there, it had an effect on his teammates. It was really exciting to hear from some guys that this quarterback competition affects just as much as those under center. In a lot of my coverage of this quarterback competition, I've talked about the fact that a lot of the time in the NFL, free agent wide receivers won't go to a team because they don't like the quarterback, or there is not really a solidified answer there. There's an injury, what have you. If you've ever played fantasy football, I learned the hard way with Josh Gordon and the Cleveland Browns for several seasons that it doesn't matter how good the wide receiver is if the ball is getting thrown over their head. And so to have Yokeith Brown, who is going to likely be one of the top targets for the Wave this year, describe Darian Mensah in the way that he did after Tuesday's practice. And I really liked, too, how he kind of protected his guy in a way where the first touchdown throw to Yokeith Brown was an underthrow by Darian Mensah. It was quite similar to Rashawn Pleasant's 100-yard return pick six, in that Rashawn Pleasant read that that ball was going to be underthrown in the end zone, and he jumped in front of it. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but John Summerall's pointed it out. I like that Yokeith Brown made a point to mention that they routinely practice those underthrows every single day. And so it was just routine for him, and he knew exactly what to do for him to just return back and keep his eyes on the ball. I think that says a lot when you already see these guys kind of going to bat for your quarterback. He referred to Darian Mensah as a straight baller, and that he's just really risen to the challenge. And the fact that they know who the leader is now, it really helps them solidify an identity on offense. Honestly, the fact that Tulane performed like they did in their season opener on offense really, I think, should get talked about a little more as being as impressive as it is. I don't care about the opponent. They were operating with three quarterbacks regularly throughout the entirety of training camp. At first, it was two quarterbacks that aren't named Darian Mensah. So these guys have only had 2-3 weeks with Darian Mensah as a starting quarterback. So for them to all feel like there's a sense of calm and you know who the leader is, that he's a guy you can go to when the play breaks down. We've all pointed out the fact that there was a point where Ty Thompson scored his touchdown. The first guy over there was Darian Mensah. Shawnee Clayton-Johnson, too, today said that after a few of his touchdown throws, he referred to him as having swag. That was something else that I really liked. It was a fun conversation of what is poise versus swag, because Shawnee Clayton-Johnson was very adamant about using that to describe Darian Mensah. And he brought up his California swagger and everything like that. But he brought up how a lot of the time he ran over to the stands and just kind of screamed at them, and that you're not used to seeing that from what they both called a young cat. Call it what you will, but it was a very impressive debut performance. And he has a really good opportunity this upcoming weekend to just solidify the future of the Waves offense with a strong performance. It is going to be a tall task. I've written a few articles about this on Sports Illustrated. I'm plugging myself yet again. But Kansas State plays a very unique secondary coverage. They play with three safeties in a 3-3-5 system where they have something called a jack safety. And I've never heard of it. Players that now play the position had never heard of it. And when I was still kind of getting there with the scouting academy and understanding football, I was getting a sense of how difficult it would be the first time Tulane faced Kansas State. But being on the sideline and just seeing how different the coverage was every time, when you have 8 guys that are dropping back at different times, and you have a third safety out there that probably operates a lot like that hybrid safety linebacker type and a lot like a nickel in a 4-2-5 offense, but the spacing is totally different, and they just tend to send the coverage and the pressure from a lot of different areas. So Michael Pratt, veteran quarterback, he threw 2 interceptions before he kind of just tucked the ball and ran with it. That is something that Darian Mensah can do, and I'll be curious to kind of see how mobile he is as a quarterback, because I think that it is a blessing and a curse. It can get you those key third down conversions, but as we saw with Michael Pratt, there's definitely a risk to having your quarterback take off at all times. I saw a lot of hesitancy from Darian Mensah, not in a timidness to run, but he was keeping his eyes downfield. He was pump faking as he was running and just really trying to, if not complete the pass, throw the defenders off. It was just a very complete performance and a really exciting one to see right out of the gate. But this one is going to be a contest where you can't make that many mistakes. And there were no turnovers in this first game for Tulane. 1 or 2 could easily end the game here going into this matchup. So Jordan Riley is a player to watch at that jack safety role. He's someone that hasn't played it before, but their defensive coordinator, he's going on his 5th year as DC, his 6th year as their safety coach, and he's the one that overhauled them from a 4-man front to this 3-3-5 structure back in 2021. So it is the same one in essence that Tulane faced, just with different players at that role. But it's going to be an interesting one to see how Tulane's offense operates. And I think it's going to be one that leans a lot on its running game. I tried to kind of talk about that going into the season opener. And yes, I was kind of aware of the tea leaves that Darian Mensah was going to get those starting snaps, but I'm not going to break the news on the team's behalf. And so I was talking a little bit in hypotheticals, if you will, and just basic general terms. And I kept referencing the run game, both on this podcast and some of my pieces. And I know that could sometimes get taken as a concern about the play under center. As exciting as quarterback is, run games are what build teams and what makes you a winning football team. You can run up the score with the passing game, but the ability to control the tempo, the time of possession, and beat down your opponent, that all comes from the run game, not to mention how much it's critical to setting up the passing game and keeping those three safeties back. So we saw 8 different ball carriers for Tulane in their opening contest, 241 yards between them. Now, a lot of those guys, Trey Cornish, Jamari McClure, those were later on in the game. But for a freshman in Jamari McClure, I was really excited by what you saw. Shawty Clayton-Johnson was pretty critical of his performance. Talking with reporters today, I thought it was one of his stronger outings, really just because you could see a fire in his eyes that I didn't really see as much of the time last year. But he's just come on so much as a pass catcher out in space. And I think those wrinkles, we saw a little bit of empty formation in this opening matchup for Tulane, but I think it's safe to say that neither one of these teams showed their cards going into this weekend. And so it'll be interesting for the defense to game plan as well, which I'll kind of break down now. But all things concerned on offense, you're in good hands with your running game. I think Mekhi Hughes probably didn't have the outing he would have liked, but you also got these other guys a lot more carries, and he just kind of breaks through as games go on, and he didn't really have that many opportunities, not to mention his legs are pretty dang fresh, and Tulane almost has a bye going into this matchup. With that being a Thursday night game that they had, it has felt like a really long week. So I think that all benefits the offense, but I think that poise, that swag, if you will, for Shawty Clayton-Johnson. But how does he handle adversity? Because I don't think they really faced that much of it in a 52-0 season opening victory. That's what I'm really going to be watching for on offense. On defense, there's a little bit to clean up and some areas that'll be critical to watch that I'll break down in just now. I'll be honest, it feels weird to even nitpick quite literally anything from a 52-0 victory. John Summerall found quite a bit to point out. Wouldn't say so much criticize, but he's a head coach, and you have to really see in between the snaps, and it's not really just about the end score, where special teams, that will win or lose you football games in a second. I continue to point to Tulane Southern Miss loss in 2022. There was a lot that went wrong in that game, but the reality was it was a 3-point loss, and there were 6 points left on the board between a blocked field goal and a missed field goal, and they also had a blocked punt at some point too. So having that third phase of the game break down on you is not something that Tulane can have happen. And so you really want to see that coverage team be a lot cleaner. But I think a lot of those things you can also see mirrored in the defense, and just go to show the fact that there is no preseason in college football is hard. It is easier said than done going from nothing. Yes, you're tackling in a practice setting, but it's just not the same thing. When you have to all go together and come together as a unit and play a different opponent, and you're really hitting hard out there, you wanted to see some more fundamentals from Tulane. And what stuck out about their victory in Kansas State in 2022 still remains the single best display of tackling in a game that I've ever seen. Just their wrap-ups. And I think of guys like Lance Robinson, who came down from the third level, made a downfield tackle at an angle in open space against Adrian Martinez, just a yard short of the down line, but he had him completely by his feet. It was just a perfect tackle. Whereas we saw a lot of hits on Saturday or Thursday where the player would go down after the fact, but that is not what you want to see. You want to see wrap-up tackling. And so that's going to be something that you're going to want to see Tulane clean up quite a bit going into this weekend. You're still kind of trying to figure out what Kansas State is as an offense. And what I don't think was a bright spot for Tulane was their pass rush this weekend. They can certainly take advantage of a lot of inexperience on Kansas State offensive line, where a lot of the guys that they have on there have played a lot of collegiate snaps, but as backups for different teams, they had to replace 4 starters on their offensive line, and that is easier said than done. Whereas Tulane just having to replace the center and left tackle, that looks a little bit easier than 4 out of those 5 guys, including their center, and having a new quarterback back there, where he played a little bit last year. So yes, he has a little more experience than Darian Mensah does, but this is their first season designing it around him as a quarterback. Now, I guess they have that edge in the sense that we didn't know it was going to be Darian Mensah until midway through August. But you didn't see that much out of Kansas State in their opening performance. You know that Avery Johnson has good legs and he can run, but unlike Adrian Martinez, he could throw pretty dang good too. He improvises well, and they set up a lot of things just with their downfield blocking. They're just a very fundamentally sound team. And I don't know if this game is going to blow anyone away from a stylistic standpoint on either side of the ball, but I think it's really going to come down to who can execute and make the least amount of mistakes. I think we'll really get a good test of whether or not Tulane can shut down an opposing run game. But the way that they were really working on some of these wide receiver splits in practice the last couple of days, this is going to be a test for Tulane in all three phases. I thought the secondary was super interesting to watch form together in that first game. And I will point out how big of a difference I think the iPads on the sideline make for these guys. I don't remember if I talked about this in my Friday breakdown or not, but just looking at the secondary, not having to go think from memory, draw plays up on there, and that ultimately just be a bunch of X's and O's as stagnant parts. It's a whole lot different when you can literally pull up and visualize and see the drive that just took place, both from a memory standpoint. And I think when you see yourself doing something and you see it in real time and not drawing things on a whiteboard, it's really different for in-game learning. And, they talk about Tulane wanting to be a player-led team. I thought it really was a good display how they led themselves in. I saw multiple times during that Thursday night game where there was one or two players just kind of huddling with an iPad on the bench, looking at some plays. That's something that you really want to see. They had the offense set up where they had all the chairs in a circle and had a giant tripod to put an iPad up on there. But to have all of this technology and also have a new quarterback for Tulane, I just think is such an edge for them. And the fact that they don't really, it just really helps, I think, guys that already have it and already have a little edge up, just be able to learn that much quicker. And, to see Joe Craddock have a presence down there that I think Tulane has missed not having the coordinator down there for the last couple of seasons, have him be able to sit down immediately with Darian Mensah and go over those plays right away of what they were looking at in the game, and to have the helmet communication be what it is on both sides of the ball. I think really smart teams can take advantage of that. And I think that Tulane is really poised for this opportunity to just take advantage of everything that's in front of them, including a win this weekend. And I don't see any reason why this shouldn't be viewed as a game that Tulane could win. I know that it was hard to predict before they took the field this last Thursday, but as much as you can only take so much away from an FCS opponent, it was still a very overwhelming victory. And it was one led by a guy who never played a live snap of college football, where there were 4 players on defense that started games for Tulane last year returning. And those were basically in all 3 different levels. So everyone had new teammates and counterparts. And they also rotated quite a bit of guys, especially on defense, as that game went on. So you only really got to see so much from them. But I think what you're seeing now is this legacy and this timeline that Nick Anderson talks about, where the 1998 team left their own legacy and timeline. The 2022 timeline is a hell of a one to follow up. But I think these players are really having the chance to create their own legacy here, and they can see the pathway now. And I think a victory this weekend would really do a lot for that. And not to mention just how Tulane is viewed around the nation. So it's the 10th anniversary of Yulman Stadium. If you don't have a ticket and you're in the New Orleans area, I cannot emphasize enough how fun Yulman Stadium is, how rocking it's going to be. And yes, it's going to be hot, but we all chose to live here. So just get yourself some sunscreen, hydrate, and come watch Tulane upset number 17 Kansas State. If you can even call it an upset at this point. But I just think based on, rankings, that's what you have to call it. Whatever you want to do, I will see you on Saturday.